Welcome to No Apologies. I'm Dana Lash. So in the middle of a supply chain crisis, an ongoing border crisis, an inflation crisis, and coming off of a foreign policy crisis in Afghanistan, the Biden administration has turned its attention to the issue that matters to you most. And we know that's gender equity. Yes, the Biden administration has unveiled the first ever national strategy on gender equity and equality. And this is the crisis the average American needs addressed right now so desperately. Now, I should point out that it's kind of hard to imagine a national strategy on gender being brought to us by a White House who actually doesn't believe in gender. But remember, gender, right, is according to the Marxist Democrats, is simply a societal and cultural construct. It's not actually biologically fixed. Gender is a creation of society and nothing more. And that's what we're told, which means gender can be reconstructed or reinvented and shaped in any way that we choose. And that's what those newfangled pronouns that the woke love are all about. You know, the whole she, her, his, and him, he, his. Announcing your pronouns is a way of signaling that you believe in this new insane view about gender. Don't ask me mine because I can't say them. It's bad. Kamala Harris is on board with this crazy. So here she is in a 2019 CNN town hall. She was announcing her pronouns. Now, you'll never guess, Kamala Harris is a woman. And thank goodness she tells the audience that she's a woman to kick off the town hall, rather than leave everyone guessing. I mean, would anybody know? Listen to the super awkward exchange between Kamala Harris and hard-hitting journalist Chris Cuomo.
Good to see you, Senator. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
How are you? And my pronouns are she, her, and hers.
She, her, and her. Mine too.
All right.
It's hard to engage, so awkward, in a fantasy and not have everyone else notice how weird it is. I mean, was everyone sitting there going, wait a minute, has she registered her pronouns yet? Wait. Okay, yeah, okay. All right, she got them. She's got them in. By the way, had a conservative answered the way that Chris Cuomo did, joking about his pronouns, they would have called for his head, not just his job. But in any case, this is the gender-bending cray-cray world of the Marxist left, where gender is not biological, but it's an identity that you can appropriate and wear like a costume and then announce it to other people so you can appear virtuous and woke. In fact, there's dozens and dozens of gender identities according to the progressive left. I don't even know what the hell two-spirited is, but it's apparently one. Asexual, pansexual, intersex. Wasn't that a movie starring Brad Pitt? No, that was Interstellar. Sorry. It goes on and on. These identities can change day to day or in the very same day even, whatever. It doesn't need to actually correlate to any kind of biological reality. Point is, if gender is just made up, then how exactly can the White House announce a national strategy on gender? I mean, what exactly would a gender policy from an administration that doesn't believe in gender look like? Inquiring minds. Well, it turns out it looks like a bunch of progressive woke BS. And that's what it is. It's a salad bowl of progressive issues all rolled up under the banner of a national strategy on gender. So let's go through this plan, which came in the form of a fact sheet tweeted out by our she, her, them, whatever, vice president. It starts out with this preamble, quote, the Biden-Harris administration issues the first ever national gender strategy to advance the full participation of all people, including women and girls, because they're people. Sidebar, that's totally New Kids on the Block. Song, lyric, it's all around the world. In the United States and around the world, end quote. Oh my gosh, did they totally rip off NKOTB? I think they did. First thing that you'll notice is there's no mention of men at all in the National Strategy on Gender Equity and Equality. And we quickly scanned the fact sheet, couldn't find the words man, men, or boys anywhere. It's like the male gender doesn't exist, which usually that's how it goes with the female gender. And that tells you everything that you need to know about the National Strategy on Gender Equity and Equality plan. But it's also a very shocking admission because by every statistic, it's America's men and boys who seem to be in deep trouble. Because it's men filling up prisons, men who are responsible for most of the violent crimes, men who disproportionately can't read. It's men who aren't graduating from high school by a soaring rate, men who aren't graduating from college by a soaring rate. In fact, it's like 60% women who are now getting college degrees. Boys are also getting the worst grades. And it's also men and boys that seem to be under full-scale assault from a culture who finds everything about them toxic. Do you remember that whole toxic masculinity? There is no equivalent culturally accepted pejorative like toxic masculinity being hurled at women. I disagree. I think bitches is accurate. Women, at least according to the Marxist woke, represent the best that humanity has to offer. But men are toxic, and it's time they got to the back of the societal line because they had their moment in the sun. Besides, there's gender equity, whatever that is, to be achieved. Wait, is that when oh, okay, that's not going to be politically correct, so I'm not going to say it. Apparently, that's what the National Strategy on Gender says. Next, quote, President Biden and Vice President Harris, verbal typo, keep it in, believe that advancing gender equity and equality is fundamental to every individual's economic security, safety, health, and ability to exercise their most basic rights. See, there's that word again, equity. It's the new most cherished value in America. It's that everybody comes out in the exact same place, no matter how ignorant or discriminating you have to be to someone to get to that exact same result. It's the idea that everyone would have equal amounts of everything. There's another word for that. What's it called? Starts with a C. No, stop. It's called communism. But of course, the left loves equity better because that word has none of the baggage associated with it like communism does, like causing the slaughter of hundreds of millions of people in the 20th century and recently about 4.5 million deaths due to a leaked virus made in a lab run by a communist party. Yeah. So the National Strategy on Gender is about achieving equity for women and girls. So does that, they want equity means, I guess, getting equal outcomes for women, even if it takes government coercion. Not enough women fighter pilots or truck drivers or brick masons or computer engineers. That's because of gender bias and oppression, of course. It couldn't be because women don't want to lay bricks, right? It couldn't be because they have naturally different interests and passions and even different aptitudes. We used to celebrate and kind of laugh at our gender distinctives. We even loved books that discuss these very real differences between women, like, what is it? Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. And we loved comedies that hilariously explore differences, like Harry Met Sally. But that was pre-woke America when sanity prevailed. By the way, sidebar, I'm curious is when we talk about equity and women being able to have a share in everything, does that mean also violent crimes and drug addictions and suicide and everything else? Seems like a weird thing to call for, doesn't it? But now we don't even know what a woman is. The National Strategy on Gender continues, saying, quote, yet no country in the world has achieved gender equality, and we are at an inflection point. The COVID-19 pandemic has fueled a health crisis, an economic crisis, and a caregiving crisis after crisis, that have magnified the challenges that women and girls, especially women and girls of color, have long faced, end quote. Did you know that the COVID crisis has really magnified challenges for women and girls? And you thought the pandemic magnified the challenges of dealing with corrupt health agencies, led by corrupt American doctors who like to experiment on beagles, all made possible by an incompetent communist government. Never mind the fact that the Wuhan virus has killed 65,000 more men than women. But one can't be bothered to pay attention to statistics that don't advance the narrative that women have it really bad. COVID is even oppressing women because insisting that people are oppressed victims is the entire Democrat platform these days. Now, you would think when almost every last glass ceiling short of the presidency, and that's only because they've had horrible candidates, has been broken, that it's odd that this women have it bad argument is suddenly so important. So important that even as this administration implodes in the polls, it decides to spend its time making gender issues the top priority. That's kind of weird. Maybe because like everything Democrats put forward, nothing is about what you think it's about. That's why when you read further into the National Strategy on Gender Equity and Equality, you discover climate change is brought into it. What does climate change have to do with gender? Turns out it somehow has to do with gender equity for women. Oh. The National Strategy on Gender lists its 10 priorities, and they are: number 1, economic security; number 2, gender-based violence; number 3, health; number 4, education; number 5, justice and immigration. Very interesting. Number 6, human rights and equality under the law; number 7, security and humanitarian relief; Number 8, climate change. Yay. Number 9, science and technology. And 10, democracy, participation, and leadership. These priorities are inherently linked and must be tackled in concert. So number 8, climate change, that's connected to gender. Oh, yeah, well, now it is. You might have noticed that Democrats have added another word to climate. That word is justice. So it's now climate justice. We need justice for the sun, or something. They've added that word, so climate change, that argument can move from being a discussion about carbon emissions to a discussion about racial and gender justice. It's a neat trick, isn't it? This way, if you oppose their radical climate agenda that doesn't even have a consensus among scientists, then they can call you a misogynist or a racist. Because again, the National Strategy on Gender, it's not really a plan for gender, not gender, I mean, as we all understand it. It's a plan to use gender to mandate progressive Marxist policies throughout every aspect of American life. One of the giveaways, besides the fact that the National Strategy on Gender totally ignores men completely, is this phrase that appears a few paragraphs down. It describes the worldview that informs the administration's plan, an intersectional approach. Intersectionality is a word popularized by another self-described Marxist academic, Kimberly Crenshaw. Intersectionality, according to Crenshaw, is the idea that multiple forms of discrimination are at work at all times, and that a person like a Black lesbian woman might suffer from more than one form of discrimination. The idea here is that this person faces discrimination for her color, her sexual orientation, and for being a woman. Now, of course, this can be true. But does it explain all gender and racial inequity in society? Yes, say the woke intersectionalists who have taken over the Biden administration. So here's more from the National Strategy on Gender about intersectionality. Quote, the strategy also adopts an intersectional approach that considers the barriers and challenges faced by those who experience intersecting and compounding forms of discrimination and bias related to gender, race, and other factors, including sexual orientation, ethnicity, religion, disability, age, and socioeconomic status, end quote. So in other words, again, it's not about gender at all. This is about wokeness. This is the real virus that takes over every institution and then destroys its former function and purpose. And then that corrupted institution exists solely to reproduce more wokeness. And the proof is how much the National Strategy on Gender from the Biden administration focuses on race rather than actual gender. Wokeness is just the cudgel to implement the communist goal of equity via every single thing the Biden administration does, whether it's the infrastructure bill that's not about infrastructure, an ad for military recruitment that's not about being a fighting force, or the National Strategy on Gender. It's all to advance the Progressive Socialist Party line. And one of the pet causes of the socialist progressives, the Marxists, is universal health care. So the nationalizing 1/6 of the economy by taking over healthcare from the federal government and offering people craptastic plans where they actually pay more. Yours truly has suffered that. This has been a long-held dream of the left. But what does universal healthcare have to do with gender? Not a damn thing. Not a single one shred thing. Nothing. Yet it's in the National Strategy on Gender, Equity, and Equality because, again, this plan isn't about gender. It's about advancing Marxism. So the National Strategy on Gender somehow becomes about universal health care. And I'm not talking about what the Democrats are usually talking about when they say health care, which that usually means taxpayer-funded abortion on demand. No, the National Strategy on Gender, Equity, and Equality is all about everyone's right to have free health care. And free means we all pay it, you all pay it. So here's what it has to say, and I quote, increasing access to health care, because apparently you don't have access to it. Well, access is determined by whether or not it's free. Healthcare is a right, not a privilege. Again, there's a difference between insurance and healthcare. All people deserve access to high quality, affordable healthcare, regardless of their zip code, income, blah, 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 end quote. Notice the word gender wasn't mentioned or stated as an objective once. It mentioned universal healthcare. It mentioned race, ethnicity, zip code, income, but nothing about gender. And that makes sense because the administration doesn't even believe in gender. If it did, the National Strategy on Gender, Equity, and Equality would have mentioned the gender that makes up one half of the world, dudes. but it doesn't mention men at all, despite the fact that men and boys are in real trouble in America. And guess what? Men actually also need health care. That's because this isn't a plan for gender. It's a plan to implement communism via a policy initiative cloaked in the language of gender. That's why universal health care suddenly shows up in the plan. It's why racial justice is all over the plan, as much, if not more, than gender. And it's why climate change is bizarrely mentioned in this plan. And it's why equity is in the title of the plan. Because Build Back Better, that plan, it's all about communism. I'm not being hyperbolic. I mean, really, every single thing the administration does is all about pushing America towards this communist model as quickly as possible, regardless of how unpopular with the public these ideas are, regardless of the president's poll numbers, which are like circling the drain, regardless of the pain it causes everyday Americans. If it means loss of jobs due to a virus vaccine mandate, fine, that's okay. We're teaching Americans to obey their Marxist masters. And as for those that won't obey, at least we know who to purge from polite society. If it means a disastrous exit of a 20-year conflict, so be it. After all, if America must be diminished via humiliation on the world stage to realize the Marxist dream, let it be so. If it means confiscating your wealth by taxing your unrealized gains, Democrats are all for it. If it means demonizing parents, fine. And if it means advancing a national strategy on gender that's actually designed to implement Marxism, that's also fine, because building new communist America is the goal. And Democrats intend to use every institution, every law, every policy, and every plan at their disposal to get us there. So coming up, we're in the midst of a major supply chain crisis right now. And one of the reasons has to do with not enough truckers. I read somewhere that we need like thousands and tens of thousands of truckers. And we're in end of October now, going into the holiday season. We're going to catch up with a major industry CEO next to discuss just how bad it's gotten. Stay with us. Big tech is taking advantage of us because we've consented to be their products. And while they mine and sell and remine our data, they're counting their money and totally selling out privacy. If you really think that your emails, your texts, and your messages are private and safe from governments, hackers, and corporations, think again. This is where Secure comes in. Their email platform is 100% safe, Swiss-hosted, has no ties to big tech companies in the U.S., and with Secure, there's no data mining whatsoever. That's what makes them different. And when it comes to security and privacy, Secure is unmatched. There's a reason that Secure built their company the way they did. So take a stand, take back your privacy, and use discount code Dana so Secure can only cost you $7.50 a month for full access. So visit secure.com, create your secure email address and account. Don't forget code Dana for 25% off for the whole year. That's secure, SEKUR.com, promo code Dana for 25% off. Welcome back. President Biden is underwater in the polls these days, and the polls, we know, are a little, well, I don't know. I question a lot of the integrity of them, but some of these, I mean, they're skewed they're oversampled to the left. So this is, I think, incredibly telling. There's one from Axios on the economy. It's really bad. 44% of Americans are confident that the president can turn the post-pandemic economic crisis around, which is down 52% from January. And he's down 15% with his own party. And these are registered voters. It's pretty telling. Part of this reason, of course, is the supply chain crisis. It is so bad right now. There aren't enough truck drivers to deliver goods around the country. I read a piece this morning just on my radio program from the New York Times talking about how the price of everything from turkey to everything is going up because fuel is contributing to that, the supply chain crisis. People are worried about whether or not they're even going to be able to have for instance, canned pumpkin, if that's going to be delivered in time. As of last week, the president and CEO of the American Trucking Association said that they were short 80,000 truck drivers. That's an insane number. So how bad is the shortage? How are businesses responding? Let's check in with Dan Eberhardt. He's the chairman and owner of Twin Express Trucking in Minneapolis. He's also the author of the book, The Switch, America's Global Energy Renaissance. And he probably has one of the most popular jobs right now. He's probably one of the most popular people I think I've ever seen. And I say this because, Dan, first off, thank you for joining us, because I actually saw at a grocery store just last week, and people were cheering as a truck came in, and they were bringing certain items, and people who were so excited to see this. Dan, again, thanks for joining me. So this is a bad situation. This is really bad. 80,000 drivers are going to have to be recruited. That's a number. That's an unheard of number.
Yeah, no, look, I think the situation is really bad. Before COVID and before all this, there was a shortage of truck drivers. Freight demand has climbed, the economy is doing well, and we just, these jobs, we just can't attract enough people to these jobs to fill all the trucks, as a company at Twin Express and as an industry. So we've got, a giant problem, a bottleneck in our supply chain, and it's really weighing on the economy, it's weighing on economic growth, and we really need to do something to change the game here.
Yeah, and 80,000, and I read from another industry insider something like over the next several years, I mean, people are looking to hire like 1 million drivers to get freight around. And also too, there's the consideration of hours driven, because everybody has to operate safely as well. You want to make sure you don't have people who are too exhausted out there on the roads too. So what is this kind of pressure and this demand doing to drivers that are already on the road now?
Well, it's pushing up wages and it's making the competition for experienced drivers intense. But, I would say this is a little bit of a forest and a trees problem in terms of these individual regulations about safety, about driver safety, and about, mandatory restarts and these kind of things, how many hours someone can work, all make sense, like in specificity. But when you add them all up, it's basically a drag on recruiting drivers. And look, the economy's hot. People can go into construction, people can go into manufacturing. They can work, get overtime. They can be home on the weekend, and it makes driving a truck a little bit less exciting, a little bit less attractive than some of these other industries. And the net result is enough people aren't wanting to get into the industry to replace the people that are retiring and to add for the increased economic activity we have right now. And so, look, at Twin Express, freight demand, which we haul, our niche is refrigerated food. That's our core concentration and what we focus on. Our freight demand is through the roof. It's really about, and we can buy more equipment, although it's hard to get equipment, but we can access more equipment and continue to grow our fleet as we have through the years. But what we can't do, what we struggle with, is recruiting additional drivers, and bringing onboarding new drivers is very difficult.
Ooh, yeah, I would imagine. What's one of the hurdles that you come across when you're trying to recruit, like qualified people to drive? Like, I always say that I think I could totally drive one of these rigs. My husband completely disagrees with me, because I'm just like, it's a huge vehicle. I'm a tiny woman and I love the idea of driving a big giant truck. It's amazing. But what's the hurdle that y'all are facing?
Well, it's something you have to take serious. But one of the problems, I think, is that, to get a commercial driver's license, you've got to be 21. And so I think a lot of people are to drive across state lines. So a lot of people, I think, are making career decisions 18, 19, 20 before that. Then we've got insurance that basically incentivizes us to hire people with 2 years experience. So then they're 23 when they start, and people have just made career decisions by then. So that's one thing, for instance. Another thing is people want to have their days off when they're at home, so they can go to their daughter's Girl Scouts, their boys' basketball game or whatever. And if your mandatory time off to rest is when you're, let's say you're coming from Minneapolis, you're dropping load in Boston. Nobody wants to spend 2 days off in Boston due to a mandatory regulation. They want to spend their days off in Minneapolis because that's where they're from, typical situation. And the laws are just designed against that. Again, everything's initially based on safety, but I think that we put so much weight on this tree that it's dragging down the whole tree and making it really hard to recruit drivers. And I think this is really a sticky point with the economy right now, and it's really limiting the economic growth, and it may stall out the recovery.
That's a huge point that you mentioned too, about having your days off at home so you can, be with your kids and do things that you need to do with your family, because I hadn't realized that. And I don't think that that's actually come up in a lot of the national discussion, at least that I've heard about it. Is there, and I understand the thing about safety and all of that, but at the same time, I'm wondering if there's if there are ways that regulators can actually make that a little bit more livable for drivers, especially if it's like short distances, especially if it's, like maybe Kansas City or St. Louis or something like that.
Yeah, no, I think regulators need to embed more flexibility, and they need to have statements. I think where maybe you look at the total number of hours someone works during a week, or you need to look over the course of a month, this is how we're going to be able to make sure that somebody can maximize their time at home, but still get their loads done. I think that the system is, focused on safety as it should be, but we've really got to take a more holistic approach so that the industry can recruit people, because that's causing an economic pinch point.
Yeah, that, and then of course, one of the stories, Dan, that I've been reading about is getting everything out of the ports, getting it loaded up, whether it's, on rail or
Yeah.
on trucks. And I had someone, it was a piece in the Wall Street Journal, and there was a shipping CEO, overseas shipping, who was saying that if it wasn't on the water 4 weeks ago, it's not getting there in time for Christmas. What can you tell in your best estimation from what you're seeing as well? Because the other thing is, you got Thanksgiving dinners, you got Christmas dinners, you got parties. You're dealing with all of the stuff that caters to that too. So what can you tell us about it?
Yeah, everything is stuck. Look, LA Long Beach is about a third of the incoming stuff received in America via the sea comes into LA Long Beach, and that port is horribly backed up right now. Look, the port needs to be operating 24 hours a day. I can tell you, in an additional business I'm involved in, we used to tender goods in Shanghai at the port and wait 9 days from when we tendered it at the port to get it on the ship. That's now taking 42 days. So that's a completely different problem, and the supply chain is just stretched at all limits. I think that this Christmas there's going to be a lot less stuff on store shelves than what we want, or in Amazon warehouses than we need. Or I think that a lot of it's going to end up being delivered via air freight, and that's going to push the cost up for consumers ultimately, all because there's not enough flex in the system for this kind of economic growth, and we really need more labor. And we need a better greased supply chain to be able to handle this economic growth right now. We're just flat unprepared as a country to do.
Oof, man, that's something that you never want to hear either, because the supply chain, that's like that's part of the backbone of your national security as well.
Yeah.
Dan Eberhardt, appreciate what you do, and safety to everybody working with you, getting all the stuff that we need to where it needs to go. Thanks so much. Godspeed.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Up next, folks, it seems like we've been kind of climbing the woke mountain for quite a bit. So have we reached the peak yet? Joel Kotkin joins the show next to discuss whether or not wokeism is about to come crashing down. Actually, straight ahead. Thanks to Biden's economic policies, job numbers have been abysmal. Inflation skyrocketing. And instead of following the previous president's pro-business agenda that had the economy booming, the current president wants to tax corporations and pass all these bills that we can't pay for. So you should be proactive and take steps to protect your wealth and retirement by investing in gold and precious metals. Legacy precious metals can help. Washington prints money to pay for outrageous bills, but that just devalues your dollar. Gold offers a hedge against inflation, and as the dollar gets weaker, gold gets stronger. The folks at Legacy Precious Metals are the gold standard when it comes to investing in precious metals, and they have a team of experts who can counsel you on the best options for you and your family. Don't leave your retirement to chance. Call Legacy Precious Metals at 866-580-2088 or visit them online to download their free investor's guide full of useful information at legacypminvestments.com. So we talk about wokeism almost daily on the program, and I know that's kind of a silly name for it, but it is really a serious issue. So whether it's Superman's son becoming bisexual, which somehow is supposed to help him fight bad guys, I don't know, or a transgender activist trying to cancel Dave Chappelle, or even top military brass talking about books on white rage while China and Russia hold naval drills together. The left's woke agenda seems to be everywhere, but when will it end? Oh my gosh, everything is just not funny and it's all ruined. Joel Kotkin is the author of The Coming Neo-Feudalism, a warning to the global middle class, and he recently penned this piece for Spiked Online asking whether or not we've reached the high water mark of woke. I'm almost too scared I've read it, but I'm almost scared to ask this because maybe there's something new. Joel joins us now to discuss. Joel, really appreciate your work, and I loved your piece, and I'm super excited to dive into your book because this, at some point, I feel like enough is enough. So when is this going to end? Have we reached, peak wokery, for the lack of a better way to say it?
Well, I think the most hopeful sign, frankly, is not conservatives jumping up and down, because you could assume that they're going to do that anyway. It's the fact that people in the middle and even on the left are beginning to say, this is not what we thought of when we thought about liberalism. I went to Berkeley, and the idea of the free speech movement being a left-wing movement is no longer applicable. And so what you're seeing is large numbers of very important writers in particular, and some people in the entertainment industry, particularly journalists who are traditionally liberal, Andrew Sullivan, Matt Taibbi, Glenn Greenwald, Barry Weiss, all saying this has to stop. So I think there's pushback. I even noticed in the New York Times occasionally a little less of the party line now than, let's say, 6 months ago.
Yeah, I think you make some really good points, and especially with Taibbi. I mean, he and I have argued on television before, but I find myself reading his work now, and I'm like, actually, yes, that is correct. And it's not because he or I have changed. It seems like everything else has. And when you have certain people that are pushing, whatever the hyper wokeism, it makes everybody retreat to these politically tribal positions, which are as awful as the wokeism itself.
Yes. Well, one of the biggest problems with wokeism in its power in the media, academia, is it just means that people just don't believe what they're reading. So some of them go to the right-wing media, which I don't believe any more than the left-wing media. But the reality is, if you can't trust the New York Times to be remotely fair, you're going to look for other options. Or you're just going to say, they're all lying and I'm not going to have anything to do with it. But I mean, I've worked at most of those big papers in my life, and yes, they were always liberal, but it was never sort of baked into the core mission. The core mission was still journalism, objectivity, give both sides, inform the public. That consciousness is almost completely gone.
There was something that you had acknowledged and in your piece where you were talking about Gen Z. They seem to be the most hostile to this sort of this cultural phenomenon, which that's really good news. I mean, I'm raising Gen Z, and I always say, oh, it's because I'm baby Gen X raising Gen Z, and Gen X we were so cynical, and we were the latchkey kids. Maybe we're raising, future cynics too. Maybe that has something to do with it. What can you tell us about that?
Well, what we're seeing, which is very interesting, this is polling that Sam Abrams has been doing, and other people have come up with the same thing, which is basically, first of all, I have a 17-year-old. And as she says, I can't stand the millennials. I dislike them even more than the boomers. So I mean, some of it is sort of one generation rejects what the last generation did. What I also notice is in my classes with my students are now pretty much all Zs, much more open to debate. I don't get, I can't think about this. I feel scared. I think I've had maybe one student recently who said, Ben Shapiro's coming to campus, I don't feel safe. And it was so absurd that I said, just don't go to the appearance. This isn't the meeting of the SA, the brown shirts. I mean, this is just a intellectual guy who maybe disagrees with you. Why is that a threat? But what I found really interesting is 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I felt much more pessimistic about free speech than I do now. I do think these young people are beginning to wake up, and they're not going to become Trumpistas, I don't think, in most cases. But they are open. They're open to argument. They're open to thinking about things, and they don't want to repress everybody else.
Right. And they enjoy full discussion. And that's the other thing. I mean, I think people are really scared, Joel, to have in-depth discussion on any issues because they're so terrified. With wokeism, they'll say one wrong thing, then the cancel culture mob rises up. And as a result, everything seems neutered. All the conversations seem neutered. The news is worse than ever. And it doesn't matter really what cable news you're watching. Everything is just focused on this distilled 30-second headline. We're going to have the modern day gladiators argue about it on television. And then we're going to move to the next thing. And I don't know how long that can be sustained. What is your take on, because you were mentioning Greenwald and Weiss and others. I think that they've been doing some of the biggest pushing for these open, nuanced conversations more so than many others.
Oh, there's no question they're doing it. And I think part of it people begin to realize is one of the concepts in my book on neo-feudalism is we have allowed the development of what I call the clerisy, which is almost like the medieval Catholic Church. We're going to tell you what you can think. We're going to tell you what you can't think. We will anything that's wrong with the world is because some other person did it to you, and they have enormous power. I am not minimizing the power of this clerisy. But I do think people are becoming aware of it. I think that, whether it was, in some senses, sort of the pushing it too far. I mean, the classic case would be the school board's business with the parents. That was sort of like, wait a minute, that's going too far. I mean, I even have people who are very, very liberal, and they read the New York Times or they watch the media and say, really? You really think that's true? You really think that the transgender issue, is the paramount issue? And then, of course, you have some really interesting things going on. Like, for instance, you have feminists who are saying, well, we don't want people who are biologically male to compete in sports. It's just not, it's
Right.
not good for women. And here we have women have finally made it really to parity in many areas and superiority in some. And I can tell you, being at a college campus, there's no question that the future is female, to paraphrase Hillary Clinton. It just may not be Hillary Clinton female. It may be a different kind of female. But the reality is that these kids realize that they have been fed a diet that is really, they can't really swallow completely. I mean, who wants to go to school when your professor is scared? Now, I'm fortunate, I'm old enough that if all hell broke loose, I'd be okay. But if I'm a 35-year-old teacher going for tenure, I'm not going to say anything about anything. Today, we even see weird stuff where we've had cancellation of science lectures by somebody who wrote something that just simply, he wasn't in favor of affirmative action, and therefore he's a racist. I mean, the anti-racist ideology, I think, which is at the core of a lot of this, it's just not sustainable. It can't work. You can't have an ideology based on everybody who's white feeling guilty, and Asians feeling guilty because they're white adjacent, and God knows what they mean about Hispanics. So I think there's a pushback, but that pushback can't be from the far right predominantly. It has to come from the center and even from liberals. And I think that process is starting, and I'm very glad to see it. I consider myself an old-fashioned liberal, and
a classical liberal,
And I can't understand this idea that, for instance, you're going to ban the Barrington Declaration on COVID, which comes from PhD. Now, PhDs at Harvard and Cambridge and places like that. I don't have to agree with them, but they shouldn't be blocked off. Steve Koonin and Mike Schellenberger, who are lifelong environmentalists, maybe have a different take on climate change than the party line. Should they be sent to what I call the digital gulag, where we just completely ignore them? I mean, it's one of the great tragedies I've seen, at least for me as a writer, is when I would write a book, I would be on CNN, I'd be on MSNBC, I'd be on NPR, and I'd be on the conservative outlets too. Today, it's very difficult for anyone who doesn't follow the party line to get on those mainstream outlets anymore. And that's terrible for debate.
It is. It's terrible for debate, and it's also viewed as a betrayal, Joel. I mean, I know you've noticed this as well. And whenever, like Glenn Greenwald, whenever he would bring up some of the issues he's bringing up now, he hasn't changed his principles. He hasn't changed who he is. But the fact that he's engaging in an open discussion of some of these issues is viewed as, by some of the more hardcore, I guess this is where we get into political tribalism. It's viewed as a betrayal if you find either common ground or if you ask legitimate academic, legitimate science-based questions, then you're betraying your whole entire political ideology. That's unfair.
It's totally unfair. And I think one of the things that's really important to keep in mind is that when you impose these strictures, you limit your political support. If you look at what percentage of Americans support these progressive positions, which for God knows what reason President Biden has bought into, because because he doesn't talk to anyone outside his circle. But, you're talking about 8%, 10% of the population. If you ask them about critical race theory, if you ask them about how much money they would spend to fight climate change, if you ask them about the issues of affirmative action, you'd find that actually a lot of people are, and I would say a majority, are on the other side. So what you've got now is you've got this relatively small group, But you got to remember, they are completely dedicated to this. This is what they're doing full time. I also want to make a really important point, and this is also about the
Sure.
really from the book in particular, which is the corporate elites really want us to be fighting over race, over gender,
Yep.
because they don't want to deal with the fact that what they're doing to the country, both psychologically and economically, is incredibly damaging. You know, it's easy for for the big Wall Street firm to say, oh well, we believe in all these progressive principles. Meanwhile, you're investing in China. Like, how does that work?
Yes. Exactly.
But
Like with the green energy and that, it's like you're empowering, and like the pollution's it's just gonna stay over there and not come across. It doesn't make any sense. We're running short on time, but Joel, really appreciate that. This has been a great conversation, and I really enjoy, like I said, I really enjoy your work. The book, The Coming of Neo-Feudalism. I would love to talk with you again. Really, I'm grateful for your insight, because I feel like, thank heavens, like we have still people who appreciate reason and logic, no matter what side they end up on. There's always room in the middle like that. So I appreciate it. Joel, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Of course. All right, folks, coming up, Loudon County in Virginia. New details on this insane situation surrounding the sexual assault in a bathroom. We're going to update you with those developments next. Black Rifle Coffee Company is a veteran-owned coffee company that serves premium coffee to people who love America, and they developed their explosive roast profiles with the same mission focus that they learned while serving our nation. And with every purchase you make, Black Rifle Coffee gives back. So last year alone, they donated 6 million cups of coffee to veteran, law enforcement, and first responder causes. Their high-quality coffee beans are imported all the way from Colombia and Brazil and carefully roasted at their facilities in Tennessee and Utah. They even have a signature roast called Lava Panther that's directly sourced from a small farm in Guatemala. So although the temperatures are cooling off, don't forget to keep enjoying the great outdoors fueled by Black Rifle Coffee. And the best way to do it is the Black Rifle Coffee Club. When you join, your chosen brews packaged, roasted, and shipped free to your door. You'll also get special discounts and gain exclusive access to products and a lot more. Purchase at blackriflecoffee.com/DanaTV. Use code DanaTV at checkout for 20% off your purchase and your first coffee club order. Loudon County schools in Virginia have become ground zero in what feels like the battle for America's soul. So will we be a nation ruled by an unaccountable state or by the people? The question's playing out in school districts across the country. Specifically, the debate is about who controls what kids are taught and the policies of the school, parents of the school boards. So now a recent scandal has fueled the intensity of this debate in Virginia. Now, as you probably know by now, a 9th grade girl was raped in her high school bathroom. It was a Loudon County school, and it was covered up by the school board. In fact, I believe it was the superintendent who had actually answered that they had no incidents in their bathrooms when it was brought up by the public. So why cover it up? Well, there was a new policy that was going to be voted on in the weeks to come that would allow boys to enter girls' bathrooms depending on how they identified, as a girl or gender fluid or vice versa also. And this story would have gotten in the way of that policy. And it also would have challenged Virginia Democrats' claim that parents really have nothing to do with their children or the sovereignty of their children in education. So you can see where all this is going. So it turns out a 15-year-old boy who was wearing a skirt went into the girls' bathroom last spring and raped a 9th grade girl. The school board knew. They tried to cover it up because they didn't want it to be known. Now there's an even more intense spotlight because the cover-up is always bad as well, and you never get away with it. Loudon County Schools, spotlights on them because of the governor's race in Virginia. So you have Democrat candidate Terry McAuliffe, who in the middle of all of this scandal says parents shouldn't have a say about what's happening, what's being taught in the classroom. So he really messed this up. He said that they had to roll out Barack Obama to save Terry McAuliffe's campaign. They even dredged up Cory Booker, right? He's still around, good for him. But former President Obama, in a very rare slip, made things even worse. Watch.
We don't have time to be wasting on these phony, trumped-up culture wars, this fake outrage that right-wing media peddles to juice their ratings.
Wow, fake outrage, trumped up fake outrage. The idea that parents are experiencing trumped up fake outrage about schools. I mean, this is a real case. Is that what the girl experienced, trumped up fake outrage? I mean, he can disagree with parents and CRT all he wants, but calling their outrage fake questions the sincerity of parents across the nation and also the victim who was raped in the bathroom. I don't think there's an ounce of fake outrage happening here in the schools. Democrats are foolish if they do not get this. Parents are mad. They're attending school board meetings, by huge numbers, every meeting, and they're speaking out publicly. Most parents would rather be doing anything else more productive, even maybe standing in line at the DMV, but they feel like they have no choice. And they know that speaking out is to put themselves at risk. Some parents have been doxxed. And as we know, the National School Board Association had worked with the White House before asking the DOJ to investigate parents through the Patriot Act, people who express their frustrations at school boards to be considered potential domestic terrorists. And the DOJ obliged them. Whatever you believe has got parents' dander up. It's not fake. And it's not trumped up outrage. But worse, Obama said that in a state with a Loudon County school board who is at the center of this national debate about parental rights, where a 9th grade girl was raped in the bathroom. And this school board tried to cover it up. They allowed the girl's dad, her dad's reputation to be entirely destroyed because he was defending and speaking up for his daughter. By the way, you realize what a judge found this person guilty, and now they're in this sentencing phase. You know this, right? Is that trumped up fake outrage too? And it all happened because of a desire to trump up fake outrage about bathroom policies. People who wanted this bathroom policy, that's the fake outrage. Boom, the school board wants to force a policy that the parents and kids don't want onto the parents and students. So no, that outrage from parents is not fake. And Obama's tone deaf if he thinks it is. And he's not doing Terry McAuliffe any favors. Now, like I said, this court had ruled that absolutely this girl was raped. And so the sentencing's to come. There's nothing fake about this assault either. The 15-year-old boy who raped the girl, by the way, he went and assaulted someone else after it was covered up. He will be charged. The boy told the court that it happened by accident. He said that his skirt caught on his wristwatch. Are you kidding me? It should be noted that the 15-year-old boy was transferred to another school, and that's where he assaulted another girl before he was even charged for this crime. And the school board allowed the transfer. They tried to make the whole thing go away. They called the cops on the dad, not the criminal. And even the students did a walkout today in support of the victim. So no, it's not fake outrage. Parents are tired of critical race theory and gender ideologies and tired of school boards that don't listen to them. They've had enough. What's fake is pretending that parents don't mean it and that students aren't being victimized. And with any luck, Terry McAuliffe and Obama will find out just how real the Virginia parents' rage is. And so after that, and maybe they'll find it out for the election results. They're going to get a real measure of what that rage is like when they see those election results, I think. Remember, this is a state that went for Joe Biden by 10 points, and now look at how close the polling is. Does that look like trumped up fake outrage? That does it for us tonight. Thanks for tuning in. Good night, and don't bend the knee.